Okay. Chaim Rabbi Isai. Welcome to what is now our 6th annual Haggadah shiur. Baruch Hashem. First one I'll never forget. Remember Chesky was there for sure on Zoom from my attic. People desperately realized they had to run a Seder for the first time. But wait till after. What? Here you go. Okay. In past years, I think we've done a pretty solid job going through the Seder Haggadah, trying to just help people understand structure. That was really the first, when it started, that was the purpose of it. To understand basic structure of the Haggadah, like what are we doing, Kadesh, Orchatz, like what are all these steps, Magid, what is the structure of Magid, and we've developed and evolved it over the years. Good? Okay. Ellie, we're good?
Okay, it's over.
Good?
I'm an angry sober.
Good to hear. Good to hear. Crushing it. Let's get some pen. We're knocking over the pen thing. Yeah. Okay. So this I want to do something a little different. We'll get to some of the structural things of the Haggadah. Baruch Hashem. We need a new holder for the phone. No, I appreciate everyone wanting pens. It's a good thing. It's good. Yeah. What? The laptop never worked. I don't know. This just works better. Now go upstairs. Might be out of service. It's true. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, Baruch Hashem. Past years shiurim are 2 of them are on the YouTube channel. One of them I'm still trying to locate. If anyone has 2022, I think I posted it. But my chat, I don't go back that far. April 11th, 2022 is the date we're looking for. If we could go back that far, there is a recording. I have one person on it already, but if you can find that one I'm missing. And 57, 80, and 81 I have on the Google Drive and can send out. But Baruch Hashem, we've got past shiurim. So this year we're doing something a little different, but we'll get to maybe some of the structure of Maggid stuff. But I want to give a little background to what we'll call maybe the Rambam's Haggadah. And we've discussed Barichos, the Lashon HaRambam, advised every year. There's an avodah before Pesach. Read Rambam, 7th parak, Hilchos Chametz Matzah, at least the first 7 halachas. You read those 7 halachas, and me medayik every word. Every year I read this Rambam, and there's still like a yam of stuff that I still don't understand, and try to get shot in every year. It's good to take a few minutes at least to sit and read this Rambam every year. But I want to work off that a little bit and give a little bit of a perspective on something in the Haggadah, and then we'll work a little bit through the structure. So, okay. The Rambam in Hilchos Chametz Matzah, Perek Zayin, establishes the chiyuvim of Leil Seder, the chiyuvim of Magid, and gives a little bit of structure to this. And this Rambam is really the basis for a very famous Reb Chaim. Reb Chaim asked the famous kasha, what's the difference between Leil Seder? We make such a big deal. The mitzvah, Sipur Yitzias Mitzrayim, Leil Seder, there's a mitzvah every single night of the year to be Zocher, Lantiskas, Yom Tzeischah, Be'etzar. We even mention it as we read Magid, that there's a mitzvah, B'chol Laila. Rav Elazar ben Azariah, the Chomim, the Machlekes. But we even mentioned the fact there's a mitzvah, Zechirus Mitzrayim, every night. So what's so special about Leil Seder? And his answer, the 3 things that are part of his answer are really based on the structure of the Rambam in Perek Zayin of Hilchos Chametz Matzah. So the Rambam says, first, it's a mitzvah shel Torah, l'saper b'nisim l'floy shnaf sel v'seinu Mitzrayim. There's a mitzvah eseh shel Torah to be mesaper v'nisim v'neflois shnaf sel v'seinu Mitzrayim. That is the mitzvah. What is that mitzvah? And remember, we spoke about it in the past. What is the Rambam's makar for the mitzvah of Sipur Yitzias Mitzrayim? Zachar. What would you think the makar is? What would the class, if someone asks you, what's the makar for the mitzvah of Sipur Yitzias Mitzrayim? You think V'gatel Vincha. The Rambam says Zachar. Zachar es hayoyim hazer she'etzas Mitzrayim. It's a few psukim before V'gatel Vincha. It's in the same parsha in Boy. At the end of Parshas Boy, Hashem tells Moshe, tell Klal Yisrael Kadosh Li Kol B'chor. Comes Moshe and says, Zachar es hayoyim she'etzas Mitzrayim. What is that? He tells about matzah, Korban Pesach, V'gatel Vincha b'yom ha'lemer. So the Rambam says the mitzvah, though, if you want to know what mitzvah are you in Mekayim Leil Seder, it's the mitzvah of Zachar. Okay. He says, how do you know it's on that night? And he compares it, to Zachar Shem Shabbos, to Mitzvah's Kiddush on Shabbos. I spoke about Arichus in the past, about the word from Meir Simcha, about how the Mitzvah's Haggadah is really a Mitzvah's Kiddush. It's a second, when we start Magid, we're really making a second Kiddush at Leil Seder. Which answers very obviously the question of the Chassam Sofer. The Chassam Sofer asks, why don't we start Magid with a bracha? Why isn't the bracha over Las Yosan? You're about to do a mitzvah. Why isn't the bracha before you do it? Why is there only bracha at the end? And the beautiful teretz of the Chassam Sofer that we're experiencing at Yetzias Mitzrayim. It's about reliving the past, which is a major theme on Leil Seder. That we're actually supposed to be reliving the past. We are living in the past, literally, and therefore we are only experiencing it as we go through, and we can't make a bracha until we've actually gone out of Mitzrayim at the end of Magid. That's Chassam Sofer's beautiful answer. But like Meir Simcha, like the Rambam, the Teretz is Pashur. We're just making Kiddush. What do you want? That's like asking, why don't we make a bracha on the mitzvah of Kiddush before you start Kiddush? You start Kiddush, and then you end Kiddush with a bracha. That is what the mitzvah of Kiddush is, and Magid's no different. You start Magid with Manishtana. That's all part of the mitzvah of Magid. That's all part of this big Kiddush. And we end with the bracha of Baruch Atah Hashem Goal Yisrael, with the Bari Priya Gofen, exactly as if you were making Kiddush. It's just one really, really long Kiddush. That's all it is, basically. So the answer is obvious then, why you don't make a bracha before Magid if it's one long Kiddush. That is the bracha. But okay, getting back to the Rambam. So the Rambam says, Zohar is like the mitzvah of Kiddush on Shabbos. And he says, how do you know you're supposed to do a Chamisha? Okay, so that's the first step. And he says, "V'af b'she'ein she'af b'she'ein lo ben chayav l'sapris he has no time v'chol amarich b'dvarim shiur v'shahoyu reizim b'shubach." You're supposed to be marich. That's one of the first answers of Reb Chaim. That one of the riburim of Leil Seder is called amar b'l'sapris b'shubach. You're supposed to talk about everything that happened, not just mention the Yitzhak. Okay. Then the Rambam continues. It says, "Mitzvah li'b'dio l'banim." You have to tell your children. So there's a diak. It's two things. First of all, there's a mitzvah l'saper. There's no need for ben there. There's no mention of ben. He bavorins af b'yishein lo ben. But the mitzvah is just for a person to be mesaper. Even if you're a chocham, you are mesaper. You are mesaper b'yitzias Mitzrayim. That's the first mitzvah. The second is a mitzvah dafka li'abdil abonim, and that is in halacha beis, is only if you have children. And maybe the chinuch says it can even be somebody who's not a child, but somebody who you just teach to, you give over Torah to somebody who you can relate to in that way. It doesn't have to be specifically a biological son. Okay, but it's a mitzvah l'hidiyah l'banim. That is the second thing. That's v'gat l'vincha. So those are the first two halachas in the Rambam, and those are the first two things that are chidushim at the Leil Seder. Then the Rambam says in halacha gimel v'tzarich lasoy shinoi b'layla hazeh kidei shiur habanim v'yishul. You have to do something different. This is the famous, so the children should ask. We do all sorts of wild things so the children should ask. We throw frogs, we throw candy, we do whatever wacky thing we can do. That is an actual chiyuv, right? That comes from the Rambam, that the Rambam is telling you that you have to do things, comes from the Gemara, you have to do things, kedei sheyish le'tonoikos, so that you should draw it out of the children. And the shaila is where that third thing comes from. Where does this is what the Chaim says, is derech shailu tshuva. The way to Mekayim Mitzvahs Haggadah and Leil Seder has to be done through asking and answering. Derech Shai L'Tshuva, that's coming from this Rambam. V'tzarich, the Rambam says, you have to do this. This is not just like a nice thing. This is not derech Kabbalah to get the children should ask. To keep them up, some sort of nice thing. V'tzarich, it's part of the essence of the Chiyuv. Shel Leil Seder is to get the children should ask their fathers, to get people at the Seder to ask the leader of the Seder questions. Why? Why is that so? Where does the Rambam get that from? That's so integral. Where does that come from? And if you're going to tell me, it says in the Torah, it says a pasuk about children asking. Now, first of all, that pasuk is not necessarily talking about Leil Seder. That's not talking about anything to do with Pesach. Then why do we bring it into the Haggadah? Well, the answer is, I've mentioned in years past, because anything that has to do with chinuch in the Torah comes into Haggadah. Haggadah, Leil Seder, is chinuch par excellence. Anything that has to do with chinuch, any pasuk that relates to chinuch in the Torah, being mechanech children, becomes part of Leil Seder. So if it says anything in the Torah about children asking fathers, it's part of Leil Seder, even though it doesn't say anything about Pesach, about Leil Chamisha Asar. Okay, so ki yisholcha bin chamachar leimor is we incorporate in Leil Seder, but it's not a chiyuv of Leil Seder, number one. And more importantly, it doesn't say anything about a chiyuv there. It doesn't say that you have to ask. It says when your child asks, this is what you answer. So where do we get that from? Where do we get this idea from? that your children asking you is part of the essence of Lo Seder. You have to do it. It's part of the chiyuv of the Haggadah Levincha. So the Haggadah Levincha, tell your children what happened in Mitzrayim. So I said last year that I believe the Mahalach is as follows. Again, the Rambam holds there is only one mitzvah. The Rambam does not have two mitzvahs. The Rambam does not have a mitzvah of Haggadah Levincha. The Rambam has a mitzvah of Zochar es Yom Hazeh asher yitzos Mitzrayim. What is the mitzvah of Zochar? The Rambam, as I mentioned, compares it to Kiddush. What is Zochar by Kiddush in the Rambam's view? It's very clear. Zochar is about distinguishing. It's about distinction. Separating what is showing, I understand the difference between A and B. That's how the Rambam understands that Havdalah is a chiyuv midaraisa. Where do we learn the mitzvah to make Havdalah on Friday, on Motzei Shabbos? Many Rishonim say it's a derabanan Havdalah. The Rambam holds it's a deraisa. It's a mitzvah in the Torah. Where did the Rambam get it from? The Rambam explains, because it says Zochar es Yom Shabbos l'Kadshei. Zochar is to separate ben kodesh l'chol. That's what it means. Zechira is to be conscious of a difference between two things. Therefore, if you're going to be conscious of the difference between A and B on Shabbos, what that's going to do is that is going to require you to say, okay, Shabbos is now holy. Right? Therefore, before I do anything on Shabbos, the first thing I'm going to do, anything mundane at least on Shabbos, I'm going to first be Mekadesh it and recognize this day is a holy day. And when I leave Shabbos, I'm going to recognize I have now left Kedusha into Chol. Hu adin, at the Lo Seder, Zocher es Yom Yisos Mitzrayim, the Iker, what is the Chiyuv? Zocher Yom Yisos Mitzrayim is to differentiate, is to say, okay, we were one way before, now we're a different way now. Okay, that's what Zocher is. Now, the Rambam holds V'Haggadah Levincha is part of that Zohar. Meaning it's not a separate mitzvah in the Rambam. It's not just teach your children about Zohar. It is part of the Zohar is telling over your children. That means the distinction that you create has to be done through your children. It's not two separate mitzvahs. That's the beauty of it that the Rambam is telling you. It's not a mitzvah you have to be Masaper and Yetzias Mitzrayim. And then you also have a mitzvah to tell your children. The mitzvah is, it's one mitzvah that's fused together to incorporate your children into your act of zechira. So if you have to show that I understand there's a difference between an Eved Paro and an Eved Hashem, I understand there's a difference between living in Mitzrayim and living free, between being a Ben Torah and not being a Ben Torah. If that's what you have to do at Leil Seder, that I show that I understand that difference, you need to include your children in that. V'Haggadah Levincha means bring them in to your mitzvah zochar. Bring them into your separating ben kodesh l'chol. How do you do that? How do you bring your children? How do you make your act not just an act of telling your children what to do, or telling your children about the Yetzias Mitzrayim story, telling them a good story at the Seder? How are you mekayim that? How does V'Haggadah Levincha become part of your zochar? Derech Shiur Tshuva. That's how you do that. By getting your children, by forcing them to ask questions to you, and then you respond to them, you've now created a back and forth where now there's one mitzvah. Your mitzvah azacher of showing is mekuyim. They're asking questions. So what is the question they ask? Manishtanu. That's it. What is the difference? That's what they really want to know. At the end of the day, they want to ask you what you want them to ask you is what is special about today, what's different about today. And then you respond to that. You have now brought V'Haggadah Levincha into your mitzvah of Zachar. It would be like saying, Zachar is Yom Shabbos l'Kadshei, V'Haggadah Levincha. You need your children to ask you, hey, let's make Kiddush. That's basically the same idea. So in order for you to mekayim your mitzvah's Zachar, V'Haggadah Levincha becomes one with that. It's not a separate mitzvah in the Rambam. That's where he sees this from. That's why Zachar is Yom Shabbos, Zachar is Yom Yisos Mitzrayim, becomes one with V'Haggadah Levincha, becomes one with the children asking. Okay, are we clear on this?
I have a question.
Yeah.
On the Zohar Haggadah, when I read it, it seemed like it was, like, Rambam trying to remind us, the same way we keep Shabbos so strict, also keep the ritual of Seder. I mean,
I don't get any indication. Rambam, I can read you his words. He just says, you have to be Masaper b'nisim flois. There's nothing about Chumr the Pischa. It says, you have to be Masaper b'nisim flois. Zocher is Yom Hazeh, K'moy Shenem Zocher is Yom Shabbos. Finished. Okay, but I don't think that he's saying about the Chumrah. I agree with that the Rambam's trying to tell you something when he says, which is where Meir Simcha got his idea from. Why is the Rambam telling you Zochar Yom Shabbos Haggadah? Because he's telling you the mitzvah of Haggadah is a mitzvah of Kiddush. That's how we're Mekadesh Leil Seder, by saying Haggadah.
Yeah, but, yeah.
Okay. Now, let's just say, just simplify it. Maybe in Cheshbon, I may have lost some people, but to simplify it, there's a unique mitzvah in Leil Seder, that our mitzvah in the Rambam of Zochar, Esor Yom Hazeh, Esor Yitzos Eretz Yitzrayim, incorporates V'yigatel Vincha into one mitzvah that they need to ask us when we respond to them. That is where we get that idea of Derech Shal Tshuva. The children, it's not two separate mitzvahs, it's a mitzvah that the children need to ask us, and we're Mekayim our mitzvah, are they responding to them. That's why Shiur Tshuva is so integral. But why is that true? Why is it so important? Why do we want by Yetzias Mitzrayim that the children mitzvah and our mitzvah should be fused in one shutuf? That's the question I want to try to address tonight. I just tell you an interesting ma'aseh that I saw in Rebbe Baruch's Haggadah. It says that just to bring out this idea of the importance of Seder by a father and Seder by a ben and V'yigatel Vincha, and that idea of Derech Shiur Tshuva, it says there's a ma'aseh by Rabbi Yerucham, Mashgiach of the Mir, that a bach once came to him and told him that he has a tough choice to make. He can either go home for the Seder. In those days it probably wasn't the same. Everybody went home. He could travel long ways to get home and spend Seder with his father, but he's been there many times. But he has a unique opportunity to spend Pesach with the Chafetz Chaim. He was invited to the Seder by the Chafetz Chaim. Obviously a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Could you imagine being able to spend Leil Seder with the Chafetz Chaim? And he asked Rabbi Yerucham what to do. And probably by now we understand instinctively what the answer is. But he said about this is you go home to your father. V'yigatel Vincha. It's part of the you have a father to hear from, to ask Manishtana from. You're missing out on your chefza of your mitzvah. You could lose all the hisayrus that you could have by being by the Chafetz Chaim Seder. That doesn't matter. It's a chefza of the mitzvah. That's just kibbud aveim. It's a chefza of the mitzvah. V'yigatel Vincha is a father passing over to his child on the Seder. But why?
It goes that way, and the sun up, that's supposed to fall down.
Well,
obviously it's a half shepherd and keep it in, but
in your mitzvahs Leil Seder also to be part of that Messiah, I guess is part of the chefza of your mitzvah as well. Saying it's really on the father to the son. Or maybe you had other children, or anyway you can be kind with those children. But no, but part of the essence of Leil Seder is that Kabbalah he's saying, that Messiah that you're being makabel.
Also,
okay.
The five rabbis were sitting together, and all the students were by their parents.
Right. Yes, they say that they were by their father. They weren't there. Yeah. Right. The catch is like Meiser B'Lezer B'Shua. Why? How could the Talmidim come in and say Rebbeinu Gizman Kiyush Shachas? Where were they the whole time? These four Gedolei Olam were having a seder together. They weren't at their seder. Why did they just pop in? The Torah says they were by their father. They weren't. They were at their own star by their own fathers, and that's one Torah that's giving it. It's hard to know if that's true or not.
The way the school system works is most kids aren't coming in with questions. Most kids how would a father see it?
Throw a frog at their face. They're going to ask you what's up. You have to switch it up every year. It's a huge industry now, by the way. The frog industry, the frog toy industry. It's a big industry.
They got like 7 different lines.
Huge industry, by the way.
That also seems like fathers have normal relationships with their kids during the year.
Okay, I guess. So you got to do something. Maybe be normal. Why are you so relaxed tonight, Tati? There you go. Obviously, as kids grow older, it's different, and and you have to the sophistication has to grow. If you die to Shabbat Aviv Malamda, so.
Not to go off topic, but the question has come up: what's better to go to your father or make your own, or your kids? I mean, going to your father is going to your.
Go to your father.
Making your own in your case.
Go to your father. Sorry. Huh? I think that's okay. It doesn't say it has to be drawn out, but it should be drawn out that there's something. If you're just doing Manishtan Al because you're supposed to do this, kids get up there and they just say brainlessly Manishtan Al, where's my Afikoman present? That's all that happens. So there is something missing at that. You're supposed to be engaging them, and as a father, you have to work on engaging them in the Seder. It is your avodas halayla, even if by your own father, and even if people are getting a little annoyed at you, it's okay. Don't be. You have to engage your children in the Seder, and that is your avodah as a father, as a child. It's to be engaged with your own father. What?
At what age does that count? It could be.
At what age? As old or how young?
No, how old? If you have
Never stops.
So that's why he said he should go to his father.
Yeah.
Because his father
Right.
also still had
100%. Yeah, it never stops. Yeah, that's the point of the Arba Bonim, is that there's different places you can come from, and the whole point of the Fidaito Shabbat of Malamdoi is that this mitzvah hits on different levels, as opposed to other mitzvahs where we just hit it on one level. Of course, there's deep kavanas in behind the mitzvahs, and different people are going to be Mekayim mitzvahs at a different level, but mitzvahs generally have one level of kiyum. You do it, you're Mekayim, you don't do it. Mitzvah Yigat Levincha has different levels to it. It's L'fidaito Shabbat Avim Lamda. And and that's part of your responsibility as a father, L'fidaito Shabbat. If you're throwing frogs at your 14-year-old, then I think then you're also missing the point. Like you gotta, unless he's totally whatever.
On the line about that, that's your father. Why is it my chapter? My father helping.
It's your chesed to be. You're not Mekayim in the mitzvah of Yigat Levincha. It's your chesed to be a klikibel to it. No, isn't that a tremendous to be a kibul for the mitzvah of Yigat Levincha? The Torah is telling you a father has a chiyuv Yigat Levincha. It doesn't stand to reason that as a ben you don't want to be the kli kibul for to Mekayim his mitzvah. Yeah? So it's not brisker, you're saying? It is or
Getting it emotionally.
what are you saying?
Emotionally getting it is not brisker.
Mitzvah's kedushin? Yeah. Why is it Haggadah? That's an interesting question. I want to think about that. Why isn't Haggadah mitzvah's aval ben or mitzvah's ben alav? Okay, let's get it back. What? Why isn't the Mishnah and kedushin list different chiyuvim that a father has to his son, and the son is back to his father? So why isn't Haggadah listed in there? Begat Levincha as one of the things a father has to do for his child. But why not? Is that so posh what you're saying? To think about it. You got to Levincha, you have to teach your child and to tell him. What? Okay. Sorry, let's yeah. Those are more responsibilities. He's talking about mitzvahs. Mitzvahs is like bris, pidyon haben. Those are responsibilities. That's another thing. Okay. So this is the kasha I'm asking. Why is this so? Where does this come from? I want to talk about derech machshava a little bit, go off topic a little bit, and understand where we have another example of this idea where the importance of engaging fathers and sons in this type of back and forth, this reciprocal relationship, and how crucial that is to the Yetzias Mitzrayim story. So I'm going to go off a little bit, like I said, this disclaimer, but let's go. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about that. When you think about it. Sefer Shema. We just finished Sefer Shemais a couple weeks ago, right? Sefer Shemais mirrors Sefer Bereshis very much. People don't realize that. You have two Sfar are the opening. You've got Sefer, the Sefer HaYetzirah, which is Bereshis, and then you've got Sefer Shemos. And what way do they mirror each other? I'll explain to what I mean. I believe if you were to ask you to name me like the stories that dominate, Sefer Bereshis, like how many of them, and like how would you break them into different like chapters almost? And Sefer Shemais. I think there's three stories in each one that probably dominate the Sefer. Bereshis starts with Ma'aseh Bereshis. The Rebbeinu Shalom is doing everything. He's creating the world. Man's terrible. The Rebbeinu Shalom is punishing man. Floods, Migdal Bavel. Lots of stuff is happening. It's the Rebbeinu Shalom basically molding his world. That's really the opening, the start of Bereshis. Then you've got the Ma'aseh Avos. You got Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov. They're the first Yidden, the first Jews. Bnei Yisrael, they're Mekabel Torah, they're Geirim. Avram is the first Ger, right? They're Nichnas Tachas Kanfei Shechina, and they work together. The Rebbeinu Shalom is intricately involved in every step of the way with them, nevuas and telling them what to do, and leading them hand in hand, so to speak. They're together. And then the end of Sefer Bereshis is the Ma'aseh of the Shvatim. The Rebbeinu Shalom's yad in that is really more in the background, really letting the Shvatim grow into their own. And letting Shiftei Klal Yisrael become Bnei Yisrael, and kind of get on their own. He's pulling the strings, obviously, always in the background, but especially in this story, having the Yerida to Mitzrayim, and so on and so forth. But it's about Klal Yisrael. It's about the Bnei Yisrael now, kind of taking the reins onto their own. Those are the three steps I would say to Sefer Bereshis. I think Shemais mirrors that very much in those three steps. Whereas as the first story of Shemais is really the Rebbeinu Shalom. This is the way the Sfarim explain what was going on with the Shiur Mitzrayim, but reinventing Ma'aser Bereishis, but on his own, with his own yad. It's the Rebbeinu Shalom. There's 10 makkahs, they say, is Kneged Asar Ma'amor Shebehen Yivra Olam, because each makkah peeled back a different layer of Ma'aser Bereishis until you got to Makkahs Becharis. That's hitting that like black hole of creation, which is you're faced with utter nothingness. Is Ma'aser Bereishis is like the first mimer. That's Makkahs Becharis. That's Rebbeinu Shalom peeling it back as an attempt to recreate Ma'aser Bereishis with Klal Yisrael now. To say, okay, everything until now has been nice. It's now going to be Klal Yisrael's Ma'aser Bereishis. There's going to be mitzvahs. It's now I'm giving over the keys to Klal Yisrael, and how I'm going to do that is by redoing Ma'aser Bereishis, and there's punishments, right? There's a flood. There's babies drowned, and eventually Mitzrayim has their own personal flood, if you will, that rains down on them, and besides for the Esher Makkos that come down to them. The point is, the beginning of Shemois is the Rebbeinu Shalom's Ma'aser Bereishis recreated now for Klal Yisrael. So now I'm going to give you the keys. That's a Chodesh Elechem. I said in the past that a Chodesh Elechem is like the learner's permit. You start to give the keys a little bit to Klal Yisrael. Let's test drive a little bit. The next story of Shemois is Kabbalah Satar. It's together, Moshe Rabbeinu together with Rebbeinu Shalom doing it, similar to the Avos being Nichnas Tachas Kan Fishchina. It's Klal Yisrael being Nichnas Tachas Kan Fishchina. And then the end of Shemois, what Shemois ends with, is the Binyan HaMishkan. That's Klal Yisrael on their own, with instructions from the Rebbeinu Shalom. But Klal Yisrael on their own, creating an infrastructure and a society to now build the world around. So Shemois, we say those 3 steps of Shemois, I think mirror very beautifully the Sefer Bereishis. And if you want to throw in there, there's between steps 2 and 3 in both Svarim are the worst chatoim that ever occurred in Klal Yisrael. One is Ben Adam L'Chaveru, which is Mechiras Yosef, and then there's the Chet Egel in Shemois. So in terms of the mirroring of the 2 Svarim, they both have those 2 tremendous chatoim that stand as the dogma of Chet Ben Adam L'Chaveru and Chet Ben Adam L'Makom, are there between step 2 and 3 in Sefer Shemois. And Sefer Bereishis and Sefer Shemois. Okay, now, but really, it's not just a 1, 2, 3, a 1, 2, 3. See, what happens is it's almost like the structure is like a yin yang. What I mean by that is that when Klal Yisrael comes at the end in Sefer Shemois, like you've got, if you talk about the man's input, so at the beginning in Sefer Bereishis it started off very small. So it's the bottom of that yin, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Sefer Bereishis until you've got the Shvatim. Then in Shemois, it also starts off small. It's all HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I'll say to brother, we don't mention anything about anyone but Hashem. Moshe is not even mentioned. It's all about the Rebbeinu Shalom. Man's input starts off very small. You come to Kabbalah Satorah, and then you come to the Binyan Mishkan. It's bigger, but it ends where Bereishis started. What do I mean by that? Bereishis is Hashem creating the world. Mishkan is the reverse, is Klal Yisrael creating the world. That's why the Gemara says that there was no simcha to Rebbeinu Shalom miyoyim shenivra shmayim v'aretz ki yom hakamas Mishkan. Klal Yisrael literally created a world in the Mishkan. This is why Lamed Tes Malachos are learnt from Shabbos. From the Mishkan, Lamed Tes Malachos on Shabbos. Why? Because what we are trying to do is emulate the Rebbeinu Shalom when we rest on Shabbos. What did the Rebbeinu Shalom rest from? Creating his world. What do we rest from? Creating our world. When did we create a world? When we built the Mishkan. So therefore, if we want to emulate the Rebbeinu Shalom, we rest from creating a Mishkan. There's many dugmos. We don't have time to go. Many demyonis between the Maisa, between the Mishkan and Shabbos. I don't necessarily have time to go into. Some that are pointed out, as it says, the Rebbeinu Shalom was Mavorich Ma'aser Bereishis, and Moshe was Mavorich the Melechus HaMishkan. It says Vayichal that Hashem Vayichulu Hashemayim V'aretz Vayichal Avodas HaMishkan. We finished it. There's a lot of comparisons between the Lashonos by the Avodas HaMishkan and Ma'aser Bereishis, because this was Klal Yisrael creating a place for Hashem in this world, and that required recreating of a world. So you have as you've got Bereishis, up from the Rebbeinu Shalom's creation to the Avos, being Makabel Torah, to the Shvatim. Shemois coming back down, Rebbeinu Shalom's Yitzias Mitzrayim, Kabbalah Satorah to Mishkan, and Klal Yisrael creating the Mishkan. Now, Chazal say, Ein simcha LaKadosh Baruch Hu, ki yom sheniv shmayim v'aretz, ki yom hakamas Mishkan. The greatest simcha to the Rebbeinu Shalom was the day of Hakamas Mishkan. Why? Why was that such a tremendous simcha of Rebbeinu Shalom? So what? We created a world. What was such a simcha of the Rebbeinu Shalom? Teretz says, there's another Gemara. This is a Gemara in Chulin. It says, Yismach Hashem b'masav. What does it mean that Hashem took simcha in His creations? When does Hashem rejoice in Klal Yisrael and what they do? Yismach Hashem b'masav, says the Gemara, this very strange Gemara. It says, Nasu d'shoyim kal v'chomer ba'atzma. What does that mean? Basically, it's like the strange thing that the herbs and the bushes, Hashem didn't tell them to protect the species, to stay unique. They could have mixed. Your blueberries and strawberries and everything could have been just one thing, and all your other bushes. Imagine that could have just all been mixed together, and it would have been one beautiful, happy family. How did they know to protect the species? They've made a kal v'chomer, and they said if the Rebbeinu Shalom told the Ilonos to stay liminehu, to protect their species, we're going to make a kal v'chomer, and we're also going to protect their species. This is Yismach Hashem b'maisa. What does that tell you? What is that Gemara, that strange Gemara, trying to tell you? Trying to tell you that the simcha, anyone who's creative, the greatest simcha is when that creation is able to go out on their own and do something. Figure something out on their own. You can create something, but as long as you need to keep constantly instructing that thing, there's no simcha in it. The simcha, the nachas that you get from something, is when they're able to go out on their own and do something, and provide something back, provide input, provide feedback. So when the Deshoyim are able to make their own kal v'chomer, however you understand that, however you understand a bush making a kal v'chomer, when the Deshoyim in the Rebbeinu Shalom's Bria are able to decide on their own that it's a good idea to protect the species, that gives Rebbeinu Shalom simcha. Ein simcha la Kadosh Baruch Hu, miyayim sheniv shmai v'aretz ki yom hakamas hamishkan, is the simcha of Klal Yisrael going from the learner's permit of a Chodesh Elechem to the driver's license. Getting that, saying we are now going to take the reins of Bria. We are going to be shutfim to HaKadosh Baruch Hu Ma'aser Bereishis. We are going to do this, and we're going to take responsibility to keep order in the Rebbeinu Shalom's Bria. Is the greatest simcha to the Rebbeinu Shalom that he ever had. Miyayim sheniv shmai v'aretz. So that is the simcha of the close of Sefer Shemos. That's why the close of Sefer Shemos is the perfect closing for these two Sfarim that mirror each other. You've got Sefer Bereishis and Sefer Shemos that are mirror each other. The perfect closing for it is that Kamas HaMishkan, is that Kiyam Sheniv Shmai V'aretz. And by the way, what is Bereishis? What's the first pasuk in Bereishis or the second pasuk? Bereishis bar Elokim Shmai V'aretz. V'ruach Elokim merachefus pnei mayim. There was this ruach of Hashem. What's the closing pasuk of Sefer Shemos? The Anani HaKavod, created by Klal Yisrael. That's the simcha. Can you imagine the simcha? That Ruach Elokim, that open Bereishis, becomes the Anani HaKavod that Klal Yisrael create. This is the amazing simcha for the Rebbeinu Shalom. You created a Mishkan that can recreate what was the essential Ma'aser Bereishis. Ruach Elokim Archevs from that mind. You can take that and make Anani HaKavod out of it. There was no greater simcha. There was no greater simcha to the Rebbeinu Shalom. So Pesach, when we come to Laseder, when we talk about the Yetzias Mitzrayim story, what we are trying to do is begin a journey to emulate the process that the Rebbeinu Shalom sent us to. So we've got Pesach, Shavuos, Sukkot. Pesach, Shavuos, Sukkot are a process. It starts with Pesach, we go to Shavuos, we go to Sukkot. What are those three steps? Pesach, Shavuos, Sukkot. They're exactly the three steps of Bereishis and Shemos. It's Pesach is the Rebbeinu Shalom doing it. And like I said, we don't mention anything about Moshe, no human beings involved. It's all about how HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'chvaydo v'atzmoi took us out of Mitzrayim. Then we're Makabel Torah, and we go to Kabbalah Torah, where we accept that marriage with the Rebbeinu Shalom, that partnership, and then we go to Sukkot, where we create a Mishkan, the end of Ma'aser Bereishis. And by the way, what comes between Shavuos and Sukkot? No, Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. Right. Well, Tisha B'av also, but so I was mainly referring to Yom Kippur. But Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur are kapara for the chet of the Ma'aser Egel. The Egel is the Tisha B'av, right? Okay, the Egel, yes, you could say that the Shavuos B'Tammuz, Tisha B'av, that whole thing. But you've got in terms of Yom Tovim that are Midaraisa, you've got Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur that are meant to be mechaper for the chet to Egel, and we read El Eskara right in El Eskara is on Yom Kippur or on Tisha B'av? Which one? Yom Kippur is El Eskara, right? Yeah, okay. El Eskara, we read, which is a kapara for the chet of Mechiras Yosef. The point is the three steps of Bereishis and Shemos are the three steps of Pesach, Shavuos, Sukkot are broken up by Yom Kippur to mechaper for the chatoim that come in the middle of the four of them. So the point is, getting back to, I was asking, where does this idea come from? Why is it so integral in Pesach to involve our children, to involve others into our story? It shouldn't just be a zocher by itself. It's a zocher together with Kiyasholcha Binchor, together with the Derech Shayla Druva of a child who's ever at the Seder with you. Because we are going through a process of joining with the Rebbeinu Shalom, of emulating the Rebbeinu Shalom. We want at that point to experience that simcha. Even though it might be jumping the gun, it might be a little early, but the simcha, ultimately, Yetzias Mitzrayim story is not finished. Sefer Shemais, the Sefer Agula, it's not finished till we built the Mishkan. Till we got to that end, it isn't over yet. Till the Rebbeinu Shalom had that moment of joy, of nachas, of Klal Yisrael building a Mishkan, the story wasn't over yet, because that was the point of it. There was no point of Yetzias Mitzrayim without the Binyan Mishkan. So there's no point in our Zohar without experiencing that, without involving somebody else in it, our children if you can, and if not, someone else is at the Seder, if you involving them and experiencing that simcha of somebody else involved in this, taking it to the next level, asking questions, involving as they go older. Their question may start as just, what are you doing, Tati? Why are you throwing a frog at me? To eventually asking serious questions, moving on. And the nachas that grows with that's the Ein Simcha HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So we want to experience that Ein Simcha HaKadosh Baruch Hu of the close of Sefer Shemais on Leil Seder. So what better way to experience it than by having by having our children get involved and ask us? That's what we're supposed to be feeling at that moment. At the moment when we're able to ask our own parents or respond to our own children, we're supposed to be experiencing that simcha, that process. And by experiencing that process, we involve ourselves ultimately in the story of the Mishkan, in the story of the Sefer Agula. Another nakuda that I spoke about this in the past, but I think I was most of one thing this year. I'm not sure I ever spoke about this, but I was asking that by Shabbos, Lamaisa, by Kiddush, every Lo Shabbos we say Zeich L'Tzias Mitzrayim. This Hara definitely mentioned in the past. How is Shabbos Zeich L'Tzias Mitzrayim? It's the last thing that should be Zeich L'Tzias Mitzrayim. Every other Yom Tov, you want to say Shavuos, Sukkos, every other thing should be Zeich L'Tzias Mitzrayim. I can accept it. L'Tzias Mitzrayim started everything, no problem. Shabbos long predated that. Shabbos is about Ma'aser Bereishis. It should be Zecher L'Sheishis Mea Ma'aser. That's what it should be. It shouldn't be Zecher L'Tzias Mitzrayim. And if you look in the Iker Mitzvahs Kiddush, in Parshas Yisro, what does it say? Zochar Sher Shabbos L'Kacho, Sheish Yom Tav Ziz Kol Matecha. Any mention of Yetzias Mitzrayim in there? Go through it. Any mention in Zochar of Yetzias Mitzrayim? No mention of Yetzias Mitzrayim in Zochar. Now, what? In our Kiddush we say it, but not in Zochar. In the Psukim in the Torah, it doesn't say anywhere Yetzias Mitzrayim. Except, I'm lying, it does say Yetzias Mitzrayim in the Aseres HaDibros, just not in Parshas Yisro. It says it in Veschanan. In Shomer Asher Meshavas L'Kadshoy, it says over there. The Rambam actually brings it later. Over there, it says V'Zacharta Keved Yisuf Mitzrayim in Veschanan. Why? Why did it switch? Why in Veschanan did it say, we'll wait till after? Yeah, you're good. That's fine. Why if Kiddush is Eichel Yetzias Mitzrayim, why doesn't it say in Parshas Yisro? Why does it wait to Parshas Veschanan to make Kiddush Eichel Yetzias Mitzrayim?
Because that's right before Kiddush Yisrael.
Okay, so therefore,
the best hachana for Kiddush Yisrael is the fact that remembering that we were the whole missionary.
That changed the nature of Shabbos at all? Like, just say it. Why not say it in Yisrael? Let me ask you another way then.
It's quite simple. There's remembering creation in the Mitzvah, which is sort of one act of holiness creation, which is temporary, temporal, which is like sort of like an oasis, like a literal oasis in the spiritual desert. And then there's the spirituality you create in the process. That's with Shabbos, that's a whole different thing.
But how does that make it one be more Zeich L'Tzias Mitzrayim?
Because Shabbos is an act of creation. Shabbos is an act of resting from creation. Work. What better place to rest than Eretz Yisrael?
True, but what does that have to do with Yetzias Mitzrayim? Why is it now Zeich L'Tzias Mitzrayim? You said Rashi said something?
Yeah.
What does Rashi say?
I'm asking,
yeah, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, but why only? Why mention Veschana, not in Yisro?
Okay. That
And that doesn't, right, yeah. And that Rashi doesn't explain why we say Zeichel Yetzias Mitzrayim. Shabbos not Zeichel Yetzias Mitzrayim.
It's a very
Yeah.
basic stuff.
Yeah. Okay, I'll just say, based on what I was just saying, I think the pshat is the pshat is as follows. I don't know if this is what you were just trying to say, but that I think Zeichel Yetzias Mitzrayim, Shabbos only became Zeichel Yetzias Mitzrayim after we built the Mishkan. Before we built the Mishkan, when we just left Yetzias Mitzrayim was a beautiful story. Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim. Shabbos is no more at that point Zeichel Yetzias Mitzrayim, Zeichel Sheshes Mebereshis. Why should it be Zeichel Yetzias Mitzrayim? Once we create a Mishkan, and now we recreate the world, literally, we close the Ma'aser Bereshis story. That's the idea, basically. Binyan HaMishkan closes the Ma'aser Bereshis story. It starts in Bereshis with Ruach Hakim B'Chayfer Pnei Mayim. It closes at the end of Shemos with Anoni HaKavod. That's what we did when we built the Mishkan. We recreated Hashem world with the Anoni HaKavod, with a chance for us to Rosh Hashanah for Klal Yisrael. That's what we did in the Shemos. Now Shabbos becomes Zeichel Yetzias Mitzrayim, because now it's ours. Because now it's a new Ma'aser Bereshis that started at Yetzias Mitzrayim. The process began at Yetzias Mitzrayim. It's a new Ma'aser Bereshis that closed at the end of Shemos. That now we could say Shabbos Zeichel Yetzias Mitzrayim. Before the Mishkan was built, we couldn't say Shabbos is Zeichel Yetzias Mitzrayim. So in Yisro, it's not Zeichel Yetzias Mitzrayim Taka. It's only Zeichel Sheshes Mebereshis. No, Maishi? No, it's not beautiful.
Our process started with Yetzias Mitzrayim, not meaning.
Our process started with Yisrael, but ended with the Mishkan.
The process of
It's halfway through the process, but it's not finished yet. That you can't say Zeichel Yetzias Mitzrayim yet. Theory. Okay. Very quickly, I just wanted to write. I said I was going to go on a little bit of Richus before. Let's get some Haggadah Torah in. I want you to be able to at least say some. I don't know if this is going to work at the Seder for everybody. So maybe bits and parts of it. But like I said, look back at other years. But very quickly, okay? We make Kiddush. Beautiful. Like we do every year. Like we do every Yontif. We start off with Kiddush. Orchatz, Karpas. Okay. Yachatz, right? What's the idea behind Yachatz? Simple idea behind Yachatz. Why are we doing Yachatz now? Is because we're about to start Magid. Magid is we start with Holach Ma'anya. It starts with the Lechem Oini. The experience, and we're supposed to feel it, like I said from the Chasam Sofer before. Very important idea. We're supposed to feel the Lechem Oini of Yetzias Mitzrayim. We're supposed to feel that Anius. So we're supposed to feel that Anius. We act like an Ani and we break our bread because we're not sure that we're not going to have enough bread for later. But here's the catch. Holach Ma'anya starts as Holach Ma'anya. But what does it end as? It ends as Matzah Shanoich Al Shema Shum. It ends as the symbol of Geula. Meaning that our attitude at first, when we first come into it, is that it's Lechem, it's bitter, it reminds us of bad things. But by the end, we're celebrating the Matzah, we're making L'chaim over it. Right? It's the symbol of Geula. It's about a perspective that shifts as we go through Magid. As we go through that experience, our perspective shifts. So in the Maisa of Yachatz, we break it, but we don't really put it away for later like an Oni for tomorrow. Right? We know already. Right away, already the kids are announcing, you're putting away the bigger half for Afikoyman. That attitude already starts at the time that we know that shift is going to happen. So there's a beautiful symbolism in the breaking of that matzah. That it's lechem oni. We're putting it. We're like an oni. We're experiencing that right now, and we're going to experience that by breaking our matzah and saying we can't afford to eat this whole bread. But we also know in the back of our head this is going to be our afikoymen, and it's going to be our afikoymen. We're going to eat it how dafka ala soiva. You have to be satisfied when you eat your afikoymen. Right? You got dafka satisfied, you're going to say, and you're going to experience the bracha of the Rebbeinu Shalom and say, I'm going to eat it later. The exact opposite. In one beautiful Maisa, you see both things at the same time. You're an oni, you're breaking your matzah because I can't afford to eat this, and yet I'm telling myself, this is the thing I'm going to eat after I'm totally stuffed tonight. Which one is it? The answer is we know right away. We have that experience, that feeling of this progression. Now. We break the middle matzah, of course. Levi, Mashari, why else do we break the middle matzah? Who is it, Keneged? No, you didn't forget though. Yitzchak. Why Yitzchak, Mashari? No?
He said when the time of the Geula, which the rush.
Just what does Yitzchak say? He says,
I'll take half the bears and you take half the... Beautiful.
That's it. Beautiful. Yitzchak is one who says to Rebbeinu Shalom at the time of the Gula Asida, he to the other of us say, we can't do anything. Yitzchak says, I'll take half, you take half. It's symbolic of that deal. And if that's the kiyum, you got to get your matzah probably down the middle. If it's terrible, then it's like, I don't know, okay, whose half is it? Which one is the Rebbeinu Shalom's half? Which one is Yitzchak's half? But okay, that's the idea behind Yitzchak. And as Moshe Aryeh beautifully mentioned at the bris of Yosef Yoel. Of Yosef Yoel, he mentioned beautifully that the Rosh says that Gemara about that we know is talking about Geula Hasida that Yitzchak is going to say Pal Gilech Pal Gilach. There's another medrash that says it was at the time of Mitzrayim that Yitzchak did that. Yitzchak went to the Rebbeinu Shalom and said at the time of Mitzrayim, the Rebbeinu Shalom said, I got to get these guys out of here. I can't stay any longer. Avram and Yaakov said, we're not good. We want them to stay the whole 400 years. Why they said that? Okay. Yitzchak said, no, I'll get them out. They need to get out. It's time to get out. You're right. Pal Gilecho, Pal Gilai. I'll take half. You'll take half. And because of that, Yitzchak lost. State in the Rosh, I think that Yitzchak lost 210 from his name. He went from Yitzchak to Yitzchak. Yitzchak is the name we mentioned at the bris. He went from the sin of Yitzchak 300 to Yitzchak, that's 90. 210 is connected to 210 years that he got Klal Yisrael out early was b'zuchos Yitzchak that he did this. Zok the Balaturim, Va'era is the opening of Parashas Eira. Hashem says to Moshe, I appeared to the Avos. You think it's b'zuchos Chol, I'm taking them out, I'm taking them out b'zuchos to Avos. Va'era steht in Balaturim, who is the son of the Rosh, so it fits. Va'era is b'gematria 208, which is the gematria of Yitzchak's name. Now, just to continue the thought and the theme, there's a big shaila who wrote the Haggadah. It's not clear who the Baal Haggadah was. Different opinions. The Rebbe of Vinim said that the Baal Haggadah was written by Eliyahu Hanavi. How does Eliyahu Hanavi wrote it? Because it says Baruch HaMakom Baruch Hu. That's an expression used by Eliyahu Hanavi in other places, in Tanah de Be'Eliyahu, and in other places. Baruch HaMakom Baruch Hu is Eliyahu's catchphrase. It's his line. So, but it says Baruch HaMakom Baruch Hu. Eliyahu Hanavi wrote the Haggadah. Who is Eliyahu Hanavi? A Gilgalav? No. Close, so close. Pinchas. What's the gematria of Pinchas? 208. The gematria of Eira, the gematria of Yitzchak. Now, Baruch HaMakom Baruch Hu leads into what? It's going to be a Rebbe Shavart. The Baruch HaMakom Baruch Hu leads into what? Arba Bonim. What's the gematria of Ben? What's the gematria of Elio? What's Elio and Ben times 4? 208. There you go. Elio Hanavi, Ben times 4 is 208. Now, those of you who had Moshe Aryeh Shalom Zocher know that I sent a vart there about the Zakev Gadol of the Mishkan, right? Vayichal, what's the pasuk over there? What's with the 2 Zakev Gadol in a row? Avrami, where does it say 2 Zakev Gadols about Vayichal and the Mishkan? I sent it in the vart. There's a pasuk in Pekudei where there's 2 Zakev Gadols, one after the other. Vayichal is Kol HaMalacha. Okay. Right? It says 2 Zakev Gadols there. Very rare in the Torah there's 2 Zakev Gadols in the same pasuk, for sure one after the other. So I heard this from a Choshev Rav. You've probably heard of the name of Reb Daniel Gladstein. Very good Torah. So he wanted to suggest as follows. Why the 2 Zakev Gadols in a row? So he brought from Reb Chaim Pelagi. The Reb Chaim Pelagi says that a Zakev Gadol is connected to Shem Hashem. Why? Because it looks like a Vav and 2 Yuds. It's a 1 line and 2 Yuds. So he says Zakev Gadol is connected to Shem Hashem whenever we want to say it. And he says there's 2 places in the Torah where it says Zakev Gadol twice in the same pasuk, by the Parasha of Milah and by the Parashas HaMishkan. And in both those places, the pshat is we're taking the Shem Hashem, which is 26, and we're becoming Banim Lamakom. We're becoming his children. Banim Ben is 52. Is 2 times 26. It's the yin and the yang. It's the 2 sides of the equation, the partnership between Klal Yisrael and the Rebbeinu Shalom. The 226 becomes the 52 of the Ben. That's when we have 226 in the pasuk. That's when we have 2 Zakev Gadols. Vayichal is Kol Avodas HaMishkan. There's 2 Zakev Gadols to be the 226s. To become the 226s become the 52 of the Ben, which is the Arba Banim of the Torah, which is Vigatel Vincha. That partnership that is necessary for the Seder between Ben and Av is the same partnership we want to build with the Rebbeinu Shalom. It's not just a mashal when we talk about children and fathers and husbands and wives, that the Shechina is Shor B'nei. It's that relationship is the relationship that we're trying to build with the Rebbeinu Shalom. And the same way we work on that relationship, we work on our relationship with the Rebbeinu Shalom. So when we want to create that relationship of Kiyasholcha Bincha, of making sure our children ask and engaging them in our tzechira. On this night of all nights, we have a chiyuv to do that. We must engage together with our fathers and our children in their act of zechir sinsarim. There's no 2 ways around it. On that night, we mentioned the Arba Bonim, which is the Gemara 52, and the 52 leads to the 208 of Elio. And I just mentioned to my Shire the night that I also found Nachum. Nachum was also Gematria 208. So shall be Zoiche to the Yeshua of Elio, to the Yeshua of Arba Bonim, to the Yeshua of Yitzchak, the Palgi Alecho, Palgi Elai. I'm sorry to get to more of the Maggid structure. Like I said, look at the YouTube channel. Or ask me for the old recordings. It's all there. Everyone should have a Chag Kosher v'Sameach. Whoever's here, we'll see you. Whoever's not here, we'll miss you. You can't wait. You're ready to roll. All right. Yeah.